Clemson Tiger fans, welcome back to another edition of the Clemson Sports Show. And even though it seems like everyone at Clemson's leaving on the football program, I can assure you that Matt Connolly and myself, Joseph Hastings, are here for you all. We're going to ride through this, and we're going to talk about some Clemson Tiger football. Matt, before we get into everything, how's it been going for you, man?
Yeah, it's been good. Just a busy time, like you alluded to. A lot has happened between decommitments and coaches leaving and support staff leaving and kind of everything else you can imagine. A lot's going on. So glad we're finally able to kind of get together. I know we've been trying. We both had really busy schedules with work and everything else going on. So I'm glad we're finally able to get together and talk about kind of everything that's been happening lately here over the last week or so.
I think it's a good thing too, because as soon as we were going to talk about one thing, something else happened. And as soon as that thing happened and we wanted to talk about it, something else happened. So I'm really glad that we kind of have this week behind us, a week of reflection, and we get to talk about everything. We're not just going to talk about the losses that Clemson has had to decommitments on the recruiting trail. We're going to talk about, of course, the staff members. And let's get right into it, Matt. Obviously, we talked about the Brent Venables departure to Oklahoma in our last podcast. Now let's talk about Tony Elliott to Virginia. What are your overall thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I think it's a good landing spot for Tony. I think it's a good opportunity for him. He's a guy that's had opportunities. He's been patient, kind of waited for the right one. He talked a lot today about academics and how important that is. And obviously that's very important at Virginia and just kind of trying to find the right fit. So really happy for him. Watched his press conference today and was just super excited for him, super excited for those reporters in Virginia that get to cover a guy who's been really good to talk with, very insightful this year in particular. He was really good about kind of breaking down each play and why he caught it and maybe why it didn't work or whatever it may be whenever we ask questions about it. So just happy for him and excited to see what he's able to do at Virginia.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And obviously, I haven't covered Tony as long as you have, but every single press conference that I went to, he answered the questions with great detail and like you mentioned, great insight. And he never shortchanged any of us during those press conferences. And even when he was assigned a lot of the blame this season, for the play calling or the struggles that we're seeing on offense, he took it on the chin and he answered every single question. You really have to applaud him for that. And I really hope he does well at Virginia. Let's talk a little bit about a fascinating situation that gets involved. I see it a lot when it comes to quarterbacks, but we should talk about it when it comes to an offensive coordinator like Tony Elliott's stature. A lot of people were saying, Tony Elliott needs to be gone. This was probably the best for both sides. But then again, who's going to be the backup option? Who's going to be the next in line to take over those duties? If you're looking to replace somebody, who are you going to replace them with? Now, the obvious choice seems to be Brandon Streeter, quarterback's coach. What is the impression that you're getting, Matt, from what you believe Clemson will do to fill Tony Elliott's spot?
Yeah, we've talked to multiple sources who have said that they're going to promote from within and that Brandon Streeter is going to be the guy. So, it's interesting, man. I know Clemson's offense struggled some this year, and there are fans that were upset with the way it played and don't want to see a guy get promoted from an offense that struggled. But at the same time, he's also been a guy that's been a part of some really good offenses at Clemson over the past several years, helped develop Trevor Lawrence, helped develop Deshaun Watson his last year at Clemson. Obviously DJ wasn't great this year, but you saw some improvements as the season went along. So he's got experience. He was at Richmond for a while and was offensive coordinator there and did some nice things there. So we'll see. I get the concern from the fans that aren't thrilled about just promoting a guy from within from an offense that was really bad. But if you look at everything he did over the course of his career and his time at Clemson, I think it makes sense. We talked to several former staff members just kind of about all the changes that are going on right now. And they said Dabo kind of runs it like a minor league system where he's just going to promote the next guy. You have a guy go up to the majors. Hey, let's bring up the next guy and get him ready. So that's kind of what Clemson's doing right now. And I think we'll see. I think it's probably the right move. I get the thought process of wanting some new and kind of some outside ideas, but I think it's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know about this situation because I would prefer, honestly, to interview in-house, and then also look for some outside candidates as well. You don't want to limit your options because guess what, Matt? Where did Brent Venables come from? He wasn't from within Clemson's program.
Right.
He came from the outside. So you kind of limit your options if you're only looking to do an in-house hire. At the same time, though, if there's a level of comfort and stability that people appreciate about Clemson, when you go there in 2016 or 2017, and then you go there in 2021 or 2022, you're going to see a lot of those same staff members, a lot of those same people around the program. And I know with Trevor Etienne, who recently took an official visit to Clemson this past weekend, that means a lot. And to his mother, Donetta, that means a lot, knowing that when they first arrived there with his brother Travis, her son Travis, that a lot of those same staff members are there, and there's that sense of familiarity there. But at the same time, you may need a little bit of some juice, a little bit of someone from the outside coming in looking to kind of prove themselves. And not to say that Brandon Streeter hasn't proved himself, but I just think it would be better to have a well-rounded interview process, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. I would just say, kind of to counter that, though, like I do think Brandon Streeter sees this as an opportunity to prove himself. Like, he's well aware that fans weren't thrilled with how the offense was last year. And there's plenty of people doubting right now that he's the right guy. So,
yeah,
I think he'll do some different things. It's not just going to be a carbon copy of what we saw last year from Tony Elliott. I think he'll mix up some things in the run game and the passing game. I think that he'll add some new ideas, maybe change the way, the things go overall. It's not going to be wholesale changes by any stretch of the imagination, but there are some tweaks and some differences that you'll see with the Brandon Streeter offense, I think. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. And yeah, I mean, I think him and we talked about defensive coordinator position last time, but Wes Goodwin and Mickey Conn on that side of the ball, I think that they feel like they have something to prove too. So we got new defensive coordinators on offense, new defensive coordinators on defense. I think all of them feel like they have something to prove, and excited to kind of see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it works out too. And I think more so the in-house hires are a testament to Clemson's program wanting to have homegrown players and homegrown coaching staff members, because we talked about the transfer portal, that you lose 9 guys to the portal. You don't know how many they're necessarily going to bring in. Dabo, still feels like he's kind of on the fence when it comes to using the portal, just because he wants to have his guys come in, the guys that he's recruited since, those kids were 14, 15, 16. And then, when you do that extensive recruiting process, you get an idea of who the kid is, who their family is. Whereas when you're doing the portal, you're bringing in somewhat of an outsider in a sense, and you don't know how that may disrupt the culture. So I've kind of seen, his point on that and his stance on it, though I do think they're going to have to utilize it, especially with the 2022 class sitting at 13 commits right now, 2 of those being special teams players. Matt, I want to kind of bring up DJ Uyunglele because you brought him up in the last point. Will Shipley went out and tweeted earlier today, and we're talking on Monday here, that DJ is going to win the Heisman in 2022. I don't know if I would go that far, but do you believe with Brandon Streeter potentially being the next offensive coordinator and whoever the next quarterbacks coach may be, that DJ will be able to step it up another level next year?
Yeah, I think he actually tweeted that Saturday. But yeah, it was
Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, whenever he tweeted, though, it was still a surprise kind of to see it just off of what we saw last year. Kenny Pickett, I think, threw 42 touchdowns last season. I think DJ right now has 9.
Yeah.
And Pickett didn't even win the award. So it's going to take a huge improvement. I know that some odds makers have him as one of the favorites for next year. He probably wouldn't be one of my favorites, just being completely honest, just based off of what we've seen from him in college. But I do think he can improve. I think he can get better. I think he can take a decent sized jump this year. You see a lot of times players have some struggles as a sophomore, but are able to bounce back and take big jumps as a junior. So it's entirely possible that we see that. And I think that he'll be better next year for sure, but I'm not sure that he's ready to be Heisman level, just being completely honest.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to show me a little bit more something during the season, or at least in the back end of the season. I know Clemson's offense had improved, those final few games on the 5-game winning streak, but DJ still had those struggles, like against South Carolina, he threw for less than 100 yards. still hovering around that 50% completion percentage, had 54% on the year. So I really wanted to kind of bring that up. I don't know if DJ is going to be, energized by the subpar performance that he had this season, and also energized by some new coaching staff members at the top, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. I'm really interested in seeing what they do there. Do they keep Brandon Streeter at quarterbacks coach? Do they make him solely the offensive coordinator? Where are you kind of leaning with that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, I think that they will keep him as a quarterbacks coach. I think he'll continue to work with DJ. But the other thing is kind of the same way we talked about Brandon Streeter and Wes Goodwin and Mickey Conn having something to prove. I think DJ feels like he has something to prove too. I think he's going to go into this offseason really motivated to take his preparation. He's obviously a guy that we've heard all along is prepared very well, prepared very, very hard, does this film study, all that kind of stuff. But I think he takes that to another level too this offseason and really works to look like a different quarterback coming into next year. So, it's not a question of arm talent or anything like that. I think it's just, getting better at reading defenses, getting better at making the accurate throws, accuracy kind of thing, and then just making the right decision. But he has all the arm talent in the world. I think he has all the talent in the world. He has everything. Big guy, strong guy, can run between the tackles and get outside and make people miss. We saw that even with a knee brace and kind of struggling to run this year. So I think he, along with the rest of the offensive staff, and even in some cases the defensive staff, feel like they have something to prove going into next year. And I expect him to get better, before next year.
So we talked about the defensive staff. Let's go a little bit more in depth to it. So Mickey Conn, Wes Goodwin expected to be co-defensive coordinator for Clemson coming up in not only the bowl game, but potentially next season and beyond. We'll see exactly how that situation gets sorted out. Wes Goodwin, obviously senior defensive analyst, a behind the scenes kind of guy. Probably haven't heard of him up until now, but been described as a genius. You did an excellent piece in which you talked to former staff member, former players about Wes, and they just had a lot of praise for him, comparing him to Bill Belichick and his execution and his game planning, the attention to detail. Do you mind just going a little bit in depth, giving Clemson fans just a little bit of some insight into who the new co-defensive coordinator may be?
Yeah, look, I don't want to compare anyone to Bill Belichick that's been a defensive analyst. That's probably unfair, but I talked to 4 people and 2 of them did say he was Bill Belichick-like. So take it for what it's worth. I don't know that those people have ever been around Belichick, but I think their larger point was just he's kind of a quiet guy, kind of in the back, not real loud and vocal and flashy or anything like that. But it's a super smart guy. He's been close with Brent Venables for a long time. I think he's picked up a lot of, tendencies and tips from Venables from being around him for so long. He's a guy that spent a little bit of time in the NFL. I think people are just impressed with what they've seen from him, just X's and O's standpoint. He's a guy that was talked about a lot for his memory and the way he could watch a play unfold on the field, come over to the sideline, immediately draw up what the offense did and kind of what tweaks need to be made to stop it. So I'm really excited to see how the defense looks under him. Obviously, we'll get a taste of it in the bowl game. The former staff member I talked with said that the bowl game will be kind of just a little showcase, a little brief glimpse of what he's able to do, but that he has no doubt he'll be really successful. So really looking forward to watching that bowl game and how he performs and really just seeing kind of that whole transformation going into next year, just how he is. I think the plan right now is to promote from within an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, and not just for the bowl game, but for next year as well. So barring a disaster, I think that's probably what we'll see. If Clemson goes and loses 80-0 in the bowl game and the offense is a train wreck and the defense is a train wreck and, it's just a complete nightmare, maybe that plan gets changed. But as of now, that's what I'm expecting to happen.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I think you or I need to go suit up for Clemson because you've lost 9 guys to the transfer portal. Justin Ross, obviously his career is done with Clemson. And then, what are you going to do with opt-outs potentially happening? I don't know. I think the bowl game is really interesting, and we're going to get more into it as that December 29th date approaches. But, I mean, how much are you really going to be able to fault Clemson if they go out and lose by 13-14 to Iowa State, with all the losses to the transfer portal, potential opt-outs. I mean, and we know with this, how this season's progressed, that the injury bug has bit this team a lot. You know, we don't know what it's going to be like come December 29th. I don't know how much we can really hold Clemson to it if you know, to the fire if they lose against Iowa State.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, but at the same time, like it's not a huge recruiting class coming in next year. It's not a ton of, you know, we think they're probably going to take a transfer portal guy or two or three, maybe a few guys from there, but it's not going to be a huge this roster makeover. So, you know, I think in a lot of ways, this roster that we see for the bowl game will be pretty similar to what we see next year. So I am interested to kind of see how it looks. Yeah, I mean, you obviously aren't going to just base everything that your plan is for the future of the program based off of one game, 60 minutes of football and a bowl game that honestly doesn't mean a whole ton of a lot. But at the same time, you know, I do think that you'll have kind of an idea of where things are headed for next season based off of this bowl game.
So we talked about Wes Goodwin and his mind, you know, when it comes to defenses, reading offenses, opposing offenses, and designing up schemes to counteract that. Are you a little bit concerned, though, about what he may do on the recruiting trail for somebody who's kind of been behind the scenes a little bit, now having to go out, especially during this time? We saw him with four-star safety commit Sherrod Colville, and, you know, he's obviously made a few recruiting trips last week. Are you a little bit concerned about him in that respect, going from a behind-the-scenes guy to, you know, having to meet families and having to interact with prospects in person?
I think it'll be an adjustment for him. In full disclosure, you know, I did have some former players tell me that they weren't sure how he would do as a recruiter, just because he's such a quiet guy and they didn't hear a lot from him. But I did have a former staff member tell me that he's a really funny guy once you get to know him. You know, once he starts talking, he can be outgoing once you get to know him, and kind of cracks. He called him the king of the one-liners. So, you know, we'll see. I mean, I don't think he's necessarily a natural recruiter, and obviously isn't a guy that's done a whole lot of it. But, you know, I do think that in time he'll develop there and get better and better and more comfortable with it. And, you know, I'm looking forward to kind of talking with some of these prospects here and then to signing day and over the next couple of weeks, just about their thoughts on him as a recruiter, and I guess what their interactions were like with him from that standpoint.
Well, we talked about recruiting. Let's go right into the big news. I mean, several pieces of big news last week when it comes to the recruiting trail. Clemson lost Keon Sabb, Jihad Campbell, and Dalen Everett, all in the span of 5 days. Keon, the first to decommit, followed by Jihad Campbell on Thursday, and then Dalen Everett on Friday. Few big losses. And honestly, even though they announced their decommitments on separate days, it feels like it may have been a little bit choreographed in terms of spacing them out, and what eventually ensued, which were for Jihad Campbell, two visits actually. He took a visit to Texas A&M and a visit to Alabama, and then Dalen Everett a visit to Alabama. So it really did seem like this was kind of a little bit of a process in the making. In your opinion, how much of this was associated to Brent Venables leaving versus how much of it was associated with them potentially just not feeling Clemson as much as they were back in the summer for various reasons?
I mean, I think Keon Sabb was maybe already looking around some just based on reports and kind of what we'd heard from the Michigan on 3 site. But the other guys, I think, was a lot Brent Venables. And it's understandable in a lot of ways. I mean, this is a defensive coordinator who was the best in the country for several years, widely regarded as one of the best defensive minds in college football. He's helped produce a lot of players who have gone on to play in the NFL and had great college careers. And so it's understandable that, you know, people want to play in his system, and they were coming to Clemson to play in his system. And now that he's leaving, there's some wait and see with this new duo of defensive coordinators, kind of see what they're capable of and see how that defense looks. So in some ways I get it. You know, it's much easier said than done to say, oh, don't commit for the coaches, you know, commit for the school. That sounds great. But at the same time, man, when you have a system you want to go play in, when you have coaches that you want to play for, you know, he wasn't the position coach for these guys, but he's still a very hands-on defensive coordinator who had talked a lot with these guys and very involved with their recruitment. I kind of get it. So, you know, I know Clemson fans are frustrated, and understandably so, but it wasn't a huge surprise to me to see those guys decommit.
Yeah. Okay, so first off, let me just say, I think there were a couple of mistakes made by them. And look, they're young, 17, 18-year-old kids. You know, they're in high school, still got some maturing to go through, maturity, growth to go through. Keon Sabb went on Instagram Live just over a week ago and had previously stated, you know, he's locked in with Clemson. And even after reports were were being broken about Brent Venables potentially be the next head coach at Oklahoma, he went out on Instagram Live and said that he's locked in with Clemson. He's all in. Even after the news had broken about that potentially being the path that Venables was going to go down. Jihad Campbell, 2 days after Venables was officially announced as Oklahoma's head coach, went on Instagram Live and said, yeah, he's locked in. We're all locked in, talking about the 2022 class. So I think that was a little bit of a mistake. You don't necessarily want to burn bridges, even though it seems unlikely that they're coming back to Clemson. You don't want to burn any bridges in any way. And, once again, like I mentioned, they're young kids, but that's probably something that, you lead a fan base on one way, probably not the right thing to do in that scenario. But at the end of the day, it's their decisions. And I do think, like you mentioned, that Venables leaving was a huge part of it. And it's really unfortunate for them that they had this happen with roughly a week or so to go until the early signing period. That's really unfair. And I think the timing of it, I don't know how you would change it. I don't know how you would rearrange things, but the early signing period being so close to the coaching changes this year has really messed up a lot of kids' recruitments. So I can't fault them for that. I don't expect any of them to be back in Clemson's 2022 class. I think the Tigers are in a little bit of some trouble when it comes to the numbers. We both did pieces that touched on the scholarship breakdown, and they're adding 13 scholarship commits right now. 2 of them are special teams players. One of them in Josh Sapp, who I think is a good player, but he didn't have any Power 5 offers prior to Clemson. So you have 3 players that could be a little bit of a reach in terms of scholarship players, and then you have 10 right now, and you don't know what's going to happen with Jaren Koenig. So I think it's a really interesting situation that Clemson's in.
Yeah, it is for sure. And you make some good points about maturity, and don't say one thing and do the other. It's just a hard situation for those kids too. I mean, and I get it. You have everything planned out. This is what you kind of are banking on, and you're going to go play for this coach and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I see your point too, is like, you kind of make it harder on yourself when you go out and say that, hey, I'm for sure sticking, I'm locked in, all this kind of stuff, and then turn around a day later and decommit. So, yeah, I get the fans' frustration. I get the players' stance on everything. It's just a tough situation all around. And I think just kind of with the early signing period, the way it is right now, that we're going to just see more and more of that, of just, assistants kind of leaving and moving on and getting different opportunities elsewhere at the same time as kids are getting ready to sign and decommitments or whatever it may be. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of that as the years go along.
This just popped into my mind. Do you think what would be your holes to poke in this argument? Moving the college football season just 1 month up completely, starting in early August, just moving everything 1 month up. So you give those kids an extra month or so to adjust to those coaching changes.
I don't think you can do that. I think it's more likely or more plausible to move signing day back, but kids aren't even coming on campus or school and all that. So, I mean, you'd be having big college football games without, kids being on campus yet, or students being on campus yet. Mm-hmm. Kids obviously come in early and get ready for the season, but I think that'd just be hard to do. And it'd be a quick turnaround too for these kids that are finishing up their high school seasons, and then they're going and doing track and basketball and that kind of stuff afterwards, to turn around and try to hurry up and play another football season. So, yeah, I think that the early signing period has some good thoughts with it. And I think the thought process was that if you knew 100% had your mind made up, that you could go ahead and sign and get it over with and not be bothered by other schools. Dabo talks about unintended consequences a lot. And I think one of those is just the way that it is now, where, everyone's trying to hurry up and sign on the early signing period. And when there's coaching changes and things like that, it just complicates things even more.
And it makes sense why they would want to sign during early signing period, because you've got a spring semester that you could get adjusted to the college lifestyle, get used to strength and conditioning, get a little bit of ahead of those summer enrollees. So I perfectly understand it from that perspective. Maybe a month may have been too much, maybe 2 weeks or something. You move up the college football season. It's just feels like these kids need just a little bit more extra time. Like I'm definitely not faulting Keon, Jihad, and Dalen for making the decisions that they made. This was a tough position. Brent Venables just days ago what was visiting IMG Academy, and Gia tweeted locked in for life. And I think if Venables had stayed, I think two of the three definitely signed, maybe all three of them, Keon being the one where you have a little bit of concern with. So, I just think there's got to be a way to work around it, a way to give these kids just a little bit more time. It's just so tough for them because they want to get in early, they want to get in ahead, but at the same time, adjusting to those college, to those football changes regarding staff members, that close to early sign period, that's really difficult for them. So we'll see if there's any adjustments made.
And maybe you just make early signing period a couple weeks later. I mean, maybe you do it in early January and still have give kids time after early signing period to enroll and stuff. You could do it around January 1st or so. So I don't know what the answer is. I just know that it's kind of a complicated situation right now for kids to try to navigate, and I get their frustrations.
Yeah, it really is a difficult situation. Matt, looking over at Clemson's program in general right now, they're in a state of flux. They are in a state of transition. It's probably going to be the most important offseason for Dabo Swinney in over a decade. How do you see them responding?
Yeah, I mean, man, it's tough to see things just completely going along just as they currently are, and just get back to winning 10 games every year, which they still have a chance to do this year, and just being run away in the ACC and that kind of stuff. I think no matter who you bring in as defensive coordinator, there's going to be a step back from Brent Venables. At the same time, I had a former staff member who's actually leaving to go with Brent Venables to Oklahoma tell me that you could take everyone out of the building except for Dabo Swinney, and he would build back up a winner and a winning program, and a program that's going to compete for titles. So, I think this is an opportunity too for Dabo to kind of show what he's capable of. I mean, there's been fans that have been frustrated with him over the years, whether it be recruiting style or deciding who plays or whatever it may be. There's been some frustrating. So I think he's kind of looking at this as an opportunity for him to show, hey, I can make the right hires. I know what I'm doing. I can build a winning program. I can win titles with or without Brent Venables. So it's a big opportunity for him. I think that he's motivated just as anyone to win. He's super, super competitive. If you spend any time around him at all, you know how competitive he is. So I'm excited to just kind of see how this new look Clemson team, new look Clemson coaching staff comes together under Dabo.
Well, we actually had an opportunity to spend some time around Dabo, very brief, but it was the day of Tony Elliott's announcement that he would be going to Virginia. It was on this past Friday. We got to go to one of the airports that we thought Tony was going to be flying into on a private jet, but it turned out he wasn't going to be traveling. But we did see Dabo. He seemed to be in really good spirits, Matt. Really good spirits. He had a big smile on his face. Felt really confident about the future. It seemed like. Were you a little bit surprised? I mean, this was just minutes after Tony was announced as the next head coach at Virginia, and he's all smiles and just seemed excited about whether it's the new challenge or the new staff members, him trying to prove himself again. What did you make of it?
That's just kind of the way Dabo is. It didn't really surprise me. I mean, I was maybe a little surprised at just how upbeat he was. Like, I wasn't surprised that he was excited and happy for Tony and happy for Brent and all that. But if you saw him there, you'd have thought he was a week removed from a national title, not a couple of minutes removed from his offensive coordinator leaving, his defensive coordinator leaving, and losing 3 of his top commitments. So it's just kind of how Dabo is. But yeah, I mean, he was definitely upbeat. I think, like I mentioned, he feels like he has something to prove too. And so excited to kind of see. I think he's excited too to just kind of see this new direction of the program and how everyone responds. I'm sure he's challenging these staff members to, hey, if you think you're ready for this, go prove it. And he's going to do the same. So, yeah, it was a little strange to see him just so excited and so upbeat, but also not really surprising just knowing Dabo pretty well now.
So I want to bring in a little bit of a comparison. I know they're not like directly linked in any way in terms of, their past. Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban, obviously, at least for the past 6 or 7 years, those two have been two of, if not the top head coaches in all of college football. What do you make of how Nick Saban has gone about his process, especially with coaching changes? He's been someone who's lost a lot of assistants over the years and then has just continued to bring in, and it's mainly been outside people, bringing in outside people, and they've just continued that Alabama train. They're somehow, again, the number 1 seed in the college football playoff Whereas with Dabo Swinney, he's had a lot of stability. Now it's the first time really that he's having to go through this, do these changes on his staff. What do you make of the two different approaches that they have?
Yeah, I think they're different, but they both work. I mean, I think, Saban feels like he's going to go get the best guy that's qualified for the job every single time he has staff turnover. And those guys aren't always going to stay long-term and usually aren't going to stay long-term. But for one season, they're the best opportunity and the best coach he can probably get. I think Dabo sees it as trying to build a program long-term and trying to bring in guys that are going to stay at Clemson for a long time, that are going to be loyal to him. I mean, Brent Venables and Tony Elliott both had several opportunities before now to leave for head coaching jobs, but they were very patient, waited for the right one, and then waited until it came along and they took it. So I think loyalty, staff continuity, all that is important to Dabo. And he wants to know the person and feels like it's a great culture fit for his program instead of maybe Saban's kind of just going and trying to find the best guy he can find with the best resume, no matter kind of his background or how long you might stay or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think both strategies are very different, but also clearly both successful. I mean, Dabo's won a couple of national titles. Saban's arguably the greatest college football coach of all time. So both of them can work, but definitely different strategies for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to take out arguably. Nick Saban is the best college football coach of all time, hands down. He's continuing to prove it. This year, again, just could be one of his finest years in a long time, just based on after that Texas A&M loss and the LSU close game against LSU and, some close games that he had to endure, the Auburn one, of course, and Arkansas. Just what he's been able to do is just it's absolutely insane. But I mentioned on the last podcast, if there's any coach that you would trust in this position with Clemson, you have to put your trust in William Christopher Dabo Swinney. You just have to trust that he's going to get things back on track. But Matt, I believe we have to cater a little bit to the doomsday crowd, because the doomsday crowd does feel like everything is going downhill. They feel like it's the end of an era. It's the end of Clemson Tiger football as we know it. In what scenario, what's the doomsday scenario for this Clemson Tiger football program, Matt? Let's hear it.
I mean, well, worst case scenario is Brandon Streeter struggles as a play caller, and we kind of see the struggles that they had in Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago. That ends up being more of who he is than kind of his resume and his past and what he's kind of done and proven in other places. So the offense struggles with Streeter. DJ struggles again and potentially transfers out. You lose some more guys on defense before next season starts, potentially to Oklahoma or whatever from the transfer portal. And, Wes Goodwin and Mickey Kahn may be very smart as far as football minds, but they've never really called plays in this kind of a situation before, and they kind of struggle. And the defense takes a step back as well. And now you're looking at a 7-5, 8-4 type of year, and recruits aren't buying in. And, you take another step back recruiting, and that strategy of recruiting where you're going after the big fish and kind of waiting until they decide before you offer more guys doesn't work. And I mean, there's a path for sure for this to get kind of ugly. Do I think it'll happen? No, but hey, if you're looking for a doomsday worst case scenario, there's definitely one out there that doesn't end well for Clemson.
See, I know they've lost a lot of commitments. Those 3 commitments from IMG. You don't know what's going to happen with Jaron Koenig. Obviously, there's that connection with Venables in Oklahoma there. This 2022 class could look really small. A lot of talent. Cade Klubnik, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You have a good pairing and Adam Randall and Antonio Williams, good DB group, but still, I think it could get bad in 2023 because you can sell a lot of recruits on one bad season, and one bad season for Clemson is 9-3 with a chance to win their 10th game for the 11 straight years, at least 10 games. In a season for the 11 straight years. So you can sell recruits on one bad season. It's really hard to sell them on 2 bad seasons in a row, because you're only as good as your last game. And for right now, Clemson has, they even though they're on a 5-game winning streak, just the season hasn't gone according to plan. It could get bad in 2022 with the scenario that you mentioned. They're going to have to clean up the injury bug somehow, some way too, because you can't tell the story of 2021 Clemson football team without talking about the injuries they sustained. And that may have cost them a game or two at some point. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't believe they go to that doomsday scenario. I believe they get to 9-10 wins. You just need to stay afloat. You need to continue to sell recruits on that vision, and hopefully you turn things around in 2023. I don't think things get turned around in 2022, in my opinion. I don't think you get back to the championship contending season. But one thing I do really want to mention, I want to hear your thoughts on this. For the first time in, God, what is it, a decade now, a decade or so, Clemson is not going to be viewed as a championship contender. And you know, there's going to be some expectations dropping down compared to what they've been in previous years. Do you think that helps Clemson in a sense?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's been, you know, the last 6 years they made the playoff. The last 6 years they won the ACC. So I mean, I don't know that it helps them. I do think, though, I'll disagree with you in that I think they can get back near the top pretty soon. I mean, you look at next year, just looking ahead a little bit, you have an offensive line with 5 starters that were really gelling towards the end of the year, really playing well. You have some really talented and good young running backs and Will Shipley and Kobe Pace and Phil Moffitt all thrown in the mix as well. Receiving wise, you just need guys to get healthy, but you know, that group I think has talent, and obviously it was the most banged up in the country this past year. You know, whether DJ takes a step forward or Cade Klubnik comes in and competes for that starting job, I think there's some talent at quarterback. And then defensively, like it's going to be a different look unit for sure, but there's still a ton of talent over there. Trent Simpson, Andrew Makuba, Miles Murphy. I mean, those are all ACC type players. So I don't think it's a huge step back next year. And you're also looking at an ACC conference that's honestly pretty easy. So I think Clemson's probably the favorite going into the ACC next year, and wouldn't be surprised at all if they're right back in the playoff mix.
Wow. Matt, you gonna go on record? Let's hear it, man. What is your prediction for 2022? Way too early 2022 season prediction from Matt Connolly. Let's hear it.
Yeah, this is way too early for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll take Clemson to win the ACC next year. I don't know that they're going to make the playoff necessarily, but you know, I think it's a team that can win the ACC next year. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they do that. So maybe a 10-2 type year. Mm-hmm. ACC champs, make a New Year's Six bowl, but miss out on the playoff would probably be how I'm kind of thinking at this point in the off season. I guess it's not the off season yet, but at this point, as we transition from 2021 Clemson to 2022.
So we're gonna hold Matt to that 10-2 record, even though he has no idea who necessarily the starting quarterback's going to be, which players are going to be on the roster. We're going to hold Matt to that one. We would like to thank you all for staying tuned to this podcast. We're going over 37 minutes now, so thank you all. If you've made it this far, we really appreciate it. If you can hit that like button, if you can hit that subscribe button, and if you can turn on notifications, we'd greatly appreciate it. I'm talking about our YouTube page. For our podcast listeners, just give us a 5-star rating. It would really help out a lot. Go ahead and follow us on ClemsonSports.com as well. Read some of the great stuff that we've been putting out. And you can get a 7-day free trial right now. And guess what's the best part about the 7-day free trial? The word free.
Free. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we love free things, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, look, and we're thinking that if you come give us a try, you'll be convinced and want to stick around. So come check it out. Come check out our team and recruiting coverage. Like you said, get your 7-day free trial and then decide after that if you think it's worth sticking around. But we definitely think you will. So encourage y'all to come check it out.
Check it out and stay tuned to our next podcast. We're hopefully going to be releasing another one this week. And stay tuned for all the content that we're going to be having on ClemsonSports.com. Thank you, everyone.